Good morning, everyone. It's right at 10 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Valerie Edgeworth. I'm one of the CE consultants here at KDLA. And with me today is Tony Curtis of the Kentucky Historical Society. Tony had the opportunity to present at the KLA meeting in Louisville, and this is one of those sessions that we want to make sure those of us who couldn't attend or had other things going on can also get to hear this information on this wonderful new project of the Civil War governors of Kentucky. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Tony. If you've got any questions, feel free to go ahead and chat those in, and we'll get started.
Hello, everybody. Like Valerie said, I'm Tony Curtis. I'm an assistant editor with the Civil War Governors of Kentucky Digital Documentary Edition, and had a really good participation at KLA this year. About 30 people were able to come to the session. And I want this to be a little bit of an interactive session as well, so please send questions, and we'll do some searches on the new website at the end of this process. So I'll kind of give a little bit of a history of the project, kind of where we are, where we've been, and you'll see where we're going, or where we are and where we're going at the end of this presentation. So we recently launched our latest website, and leading up to that, that site was a lot of initial work to frame what the Civil War Governors of Kentucky project was, what the scope was, and how we would proceed in collecting documents from archives in and around Frankfort, across the state of Kentucky, and really across the United States and the world if we find documents elsewhere. So we spent a lot of time here initially at KDLA framing our project, going through the archives here. We've communicated with over 6,000 archives, museums, and libraries across the eastern part of the United States, and some of the major archives as well, thinking of NARA, thinking of the Library of Congress, the Huntington Library, and some of the larger repositories. Initially, we thought we'd find 25,000 documents, and after going to 4 repositories, the Kentucky Department of Library and Archives, the Kentucky Historical Society, the Kentucky Department of Military Affairs, and the Filson Historical Society, we're at a little over 23,000 documents at the moment, so our projections have changed, needless to say. So thinking about the governors, we had to frame a scope, and that was really the major point we had to initially start with, was how we were going to frame this and define it. And we decided that we would frame the scope as being the beginning, being November of 1860, the election of Abraham Lincoln, through the end of slavery in December of 1865. And that really helped us define what we were looking for, and what we would collect and ultimately digitize and give access to online. And that's been the driving force, is accessibility, is being able to access it in a digital format, not only the original document, but also the best transcription that we can get to during this process, and make that available, keyword searchable, and hopefully the next phase of the project will be adding in some digital humanities tools to really start parsing that data to understand what is available and what is there. So that's our copy of our brochure that you're seeing there. The Governors Project, we have 5 governors during the Civil War, 3 Union and 2 Confederate. Bari McGoffin, who is a Democrat and a pro-Southern leaning governor who eventually resigns in almost a coup d'etat, and James F. Robinson comes to power from Scott County, and eventually Thomas Bramlett from Adair County. And then we have George Johnson, who's the first provisional Confederate governor of Kentucky, who is from Scott County as well, ends up dying at the Battle of Shiloh, and Richard Halls, who was inaugurated in Frankfort during the Confederate invasion of 1862, and basically after a day or a couple hours is run out of Frankfort and is on the run the rest of the war, either with the Army or in Virginia, or staying with prominent Kentucky families in the South. So as you can imagine, most of the archival material we're finding, a big portion of that being the official governor's papers here in Frankfort at the Kentucky Department of Libraries and Archives, and the hard part is finding the Confederate governor's documents. We have one cache at the Kentucky Historical Society for George W. Johnson, which is about 200 documents, 100 which are within scope of our project. And we have about 10 documents so far for Richard Hall. So all the other documents, the 23,000, are Union governor documents at this point. I need to figure out. Okay, there we go. So that's kind of a little bit about the purpose of the project, how we defined it, and where we're and what really this project at this point is defined as the scope. And there are some great portraits of our governors. The Confederate governors' portraits are not the best. These are all in the collection of the Kentucky Historical Society. We jokingly say that Beriah McGolphin kind of looks like Santa Claus. So that's kind of a little additional perky fun fact there. So processing the documents and really getting to the work itself and how each document progresses from actual identification to publishing of the document actually being online. And I'll go through each of these steps briefly, and I'll even use this dandy arrow here that, did it work? Yes. There we go. ID and control. So we initially go out to the archives and sit down with collections and page collections one at a time and leaf through every collection to identify and make some brief notes of some critical information about each of the documents that is in the scope of our collection. So this is actually in the archives work. We have had privilege of working in KDLA archives with Brandon Sloan at KDMA. The Filson and KHS have given us quite good access to actually work in the archives and have been great partners on this project. Then we move to the next phase, which is going back to what we had identified, and we create a high resolution scan of each document. So we're using a big, large format scanner, scanning at 300 dpi, 24-bit color, and creating TIFF files for us to work from originally as the digital masters. Then we get into image processing once we get back to on-site at KHS, which is converting, making sure that the documents are readable and cropping them down and creating workable PDFs, which is the format that we're making available to the public on our website, and what we work from when we are doing transcriptions and the rest of this process. So then we go into transcription mode, which is just a refutation of what we see on the page. What words we see in the document is what appears in the transcription text on our database. And we're using a FileMaker-based database called DocTracker, which is a partnership with the University of Virginia. The Dolly Madison papers uses this, the Woodrow Wilson papers, the Pinckney papers out of South Carolina, and the George Washington papers. And we went through an NHPRC grant, partnering with them to expand the scope of DocTracker. And part was we were a good fit for that because they have limited numbers of letters they are working with, and it's all correspondence, other than George Washington, who is doing financial documents, so they have some ledgers. But our project is so broad in scope as far as the type of documents we're processing, from legal documents to large surveys of properties on some of these pardon cases at KDLA, to financial documents, to all different types of genres of documents. So we were to help expand that database, which is what we work in and do our transcription in. So once we're in that database, we single proof, we transcribe, and then a different editor goes through and single proofs the document, making sure all the transcription is correct. And then moving on to the markup phase, which is actually adding the metadata and coding the documents to be available on our new website, which you will see here in a few moments, early access. And we are currently in the phase of double proofing, which is the second proofing stage. One last look at the text to make sure it's the text that has the most credibility. Even though we are providing the user with the original document as well, but we need to get to the transcription that is the most representative of what is on the page. We just got another grant through NHPRC to hire some graduate research associates. We hired 8 from colleges across the United States, some very fine institutions, and they started work this past week on annotation, which really gets into the next phase of the project, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but it is identifying all the people, organizations, geographical features, and businesses incorporated in these documents and writing a annotation and identification for each of these individuals. And we'll be making all that available in the next phase of this project. But it also gets to the point of the social networking aspect, which I will talk about here in a little bit. Then we have another phase of the project with this fact-checking, which is going back, looking at the annotations, making sure they are based in good historical scholarship, that we have the evidence to be able to say what we're saying, and that's the next phase. So that's for intellectual control of the annotations. And then a final review, and then ultimately publishing. So we're really publishing a little bit earlier with this phase with early access without getting through all the stages beyond double proofing. For many reasons, we had 10,000 to that point. Our funders requested that access be an issue because there have been some digital documentary editing projects that have nothing out there right now. So we were encouraged to really test a new platform for documentary editing. We used an Omeka-based platform, and we're to not only create a website, but to create a report on how we went through the process, the positives and the negatives of using Omeka for this access point, and providing that to NHPRC, but also to the broader community of documentary editors, archivists, and librarians across the nation. So we are in early publication form, and you will see that here shortly. Moving on to the next slide. So here we are. I talked about numbers. So these are the different processes we've started so far. 23,000 documents identified. A majority of those have been scanned. 13,000 have been transcribed. Almost 11,000 single proofed that are in scope, and 10,500 that are going through the markup phase. And so constantly paying attention to the scope, the numbers get whittled down a little bit at a time. So we're to the point of having 10,000, I think it's 567 or 65 that are online. And we've just entered the double proofing stage. And we're at 210 as of yesterday, maybe 211 for the first 1,500 documents that will really go into that Annotation Beta, which is the next phase of this project. So backing up a little bit here, really to understand, really getting into annotation mode, but also document collection mode. One of the early projects we took on, the mini projects, it's not really mini, it's rather a large project, was looking at 1860s Kentucky state government, military structures, federal government structures, and Confederate government structures, both provisional government at the state level and the national Confederate government. And we really needed to have an understanding of how that worked, what it looked like, what the structures looked like, to really understand how we were going to look for documents. So we knew the governor's documents existed, but the governors have correspondence with all parts of society. And that's really what this project is about. Yes, it's about the governors. We are going through the process to identify scope as the governors, but it's really about all the individuals who are within the project, within those documents. Okay, sorry, I have a question.
Would the military orders of General Burbridge be included in this?
Good question. Some of them will. It depends. So it depends on General Burbridge. If he is corresponding, and he is, with the governors, we have some documents from the Filson Historical Society that are included that come to mind. If they're in scope between the scope of November 1860 and 1865, they will be included. So they have to have contact with the governor. So we are picking up Burbridge in this process. So good question. So thinking about this, so we took probably about 6 months to a year to draw this chart on the wall, the beautiful mind project as we call it. And we noticed that the structures exist in writing and in the Constitution, and there's no one source that really gives you what the structures are like. So we had to really start weaving together the structures ourselves through multiple sources. And they exist one way on paper, but they actually function in a very different way that is not what is on paper, which is hilarious, but it's very true. So once we had this on the wall, we knew what collections. We were able to extend our search at KDLA, especially to look at the non-governor's collections, as we're calling, so different offices within the executive branch, legislative branch, and judicial branch. And we have a lot of judicial materials because of the pardon files, remission files, and the respite files here at KDLA. So we really need to understand how papers and correspondence documents were communicated, were exchanged between different organizations, different individuals, and this was the project that really helped us to understand what these structures were like and how they existed and what the possibilities were for our project. It was a little mind-blowing too to see these structures and all the possibilities. Another group that we knew about but really started to identify was the military board, which you can kind of see. This is not a great picture, but up here in the top left-hand corner of this Post-it note. So all the walls look like this in our office. Lots of big Post-it notes. But the military board, and a military board comes into being in May of '61, really when they are starting to question McGoffin's loyalty to the state. So they assume all the commander-in-chief military powers of the governor's office. At first, McGoffin, as you can see, as president, he is president of the military board, but as they progress through September of '61, and then eventually into '62, for the remainder of his time in office, the military board is in charge of all military-related matters. McGoffin disappears from the board at one point, and you can kind of see the direction they're moving in, which ultimately leads to his resignation. So the military board it's a big gray area for us because it's a question of, is it in scope? Date-wise, it might be. Is it executing the powers of the office of the governor? Should we treat it as the governor at this point? So we're collecting documents, but we're not sure if those are going to be included at this point. A lot of those documents we're seeing coming out of the Kentucky Department of Military Affairs collection with Brandon Sloan, and bits and pieces from other archives. We've seen some at the Filson so far. But as you can imagine, the contact between state and federal government is a larger question for us, and one we'll eventually start planning here in the next couple of years, thinking about the National Archives, thinking about how we see one side of the conversation basically from the documents that are here in the state, but we know there's another side of the conversation at NARA and other national archives and all the regional branches as well. So we need to be able to go there, and really the 25 or the 23,000 documents we have, we're predicting 40,000 plus documents at this point. We really don't know the number. Depends on really what NARA is going to give us. There's a lot of communication going back and forth, so that number could be exploded again at some point. But we'll find out once we start looking at the NARA stuff. And military board would even make that a larger collection of items. So thinking about scope and possibility and how much work we can do and give access to on the website is another question. So if not, hopefully another phase down the road. So what we're finding and talking about these structures, here's some cool letterhead. I'll take that arrow off because it's not pointing to anything. But all different kinds of offices, Quartermaster General, different military districts, camps, the executive department, hotels, private business, and individuals. So I'm a fan of letterhead. I love looking at old letterhead, going through collections, and this is just a small portion. I just cut some pieces out here so we could get a quick look at this. We also have multiple places. So there's correspondence at the military level, at the personal level, all different levels of government going between different cities: Cynthiana, Frankfort, Franklin, Breckinridge County, Washington, D.C. As you can see, just the networks of individuals who are communicating with each other, and the networks of communities that are in constant contact with Frankfort, with Washington, D.C. A little shout out to Boyd County, where I'm from, so I had to put that in there. So it's neat. I mean, and you can see the handwriting as well varies to a large degree. And then individuals, which is what I said. This project is opening up the scholarship and to researchers, professional historians, genealogists, student researchers looking for particular surnames. We are opening up the dialogue here with what we are projecting to be 250,000 annotations, 250,000 new historical actors. So what is the Civil War like? We know it from one level right now, but as we've talked with other projects who do selective annotation on their projects for only the important people, as they say, we don't know who the important people are, and that's why we're annotating all people and treating all individuals, organizations, and businesses as equal annotations. We need to really understand. We don't understand who the important people are. We will find out a lot of new names. We already have. There are networks of attorneys who are the power brokers for pardons with particular governors, particular businessmen who are in constant contact with the governor. But there's also everyday, normal Kentuckians who are writing to the governor, petitioning the governor on behalf of a neighbor, of a enslaved individual. As you can see, so we've got people like Garrett Davis, a famous politician, a very notable politician, to women actively engaged in the petitioning process to the governor, and all the way down to Abner and Jordan here, who are enslaved African Americans in Scott County, I do believe. Which we can talk a little bit about later on as well. So we have all individuals in Kentucky society included in this, and we're gaining access to the names, to who they are, and how they are interacting in this society. And then all types of topics. So as you can see, I just pulled out some phrases and words here: slavery, fugitives, both fugitives, fugitive slaves, fugitives as in individuals who are either have been arrested and escaped custody, or they are actively looking for because of crimes, perils of war, petitioner, bigamy, widows, horses. So there's all different kinds of subjects. And one thing we really have learned from this is that society in 1860 Kentucky is not that much different than modern day society. It's gruesome. Of course, Civil War is gruesome, but you really understand all the different legal cases that are coming through the governor's office, that crimes are being committed on a daily basis, whether that be illegally operating a tavern without a license, to rape, to murder, to multiple other types of crimes. Betting on elections is another one that is quite extensively covered, especially in 63 and 64. So you're getting a really good look, a broad look at what society is like in Kentucky in the 1860s. Going back to script, as you saw with some of the previous screens, there are a lot of very unique handwritings. Some more legible than others. The one that you see on your screen now is from James F. Robinson, the second Union governor from Scott County, from Georgetown. And this is one of the better representations of his script. It's at least legible. The more you work with an individual script, the better, as you can imagine, and have done on several occasions, the better you get with it. But there are many instances where he is just completely illegible. So we were unsure as to why this. We speculate that maybe he had a palsy or an arthritis of some sort. or we jokingly say that there was an earthquake the entire time he was in office just because of the bad penmanship and the shakiness of his penmanship. But you get the more you read his handwriting, the better you can understand it, which introduces one of the major problems we have is all the petitions we have that go through the governor's office. So you have an individual writing the petition. Sometimes they're actually signing the petition. Sometimes it's a lawyer or some a literate individual in a county who is writing the petition. And then you'll have 200 signatures, individual signatures underneath that. And some individuals are more literate than others. And they spell phonetically sometimes. Sometimes you only have the first and the last name or initial and the last name to try to interpret their handwriting and transcribe what they're signing. So it's an adventure every day with different handwritings, and it just depends on what part of the state, what county you are dealing in, as to the levels of education in different parts of the society, who's petitioning, if it's an individual. So we have a lot of very different types of handwriting styles and approaches to petitioning. So James Robinson is definitely one of the more unique. James Guthrie, also a powerful man, businessman and politician from Louisville, has horrendous handwriting, worse than James Robinson, and if anybody's looked at his papers, can attest to it's pretty bad. So hopefully we don't have too much of his. It's just a word here. So a lot of this work has been funded not only by the Kentucky Historical Society in the state of Kentucky, but through some private donations, private foundations, but also the NEH and NHPRC grants have allowed us to employ individuals, have allowed us to build out these, not only the database, but the Omeka site, and moving forward towards our annotation tool, which we were calling Mashbill, which we think is an appropriate name because you know what mash bill is and what we're looking at with bourbon, right? So the mash bill gives you the recipe for making the bourbon. So all these individuals are really making that recipe for what society is like in Kentucky. So we thought it was appropriate. It's very Kentuckian, and hopefully will be used by many individuals across the nation, especially the documentary editing community, maybe even moving into the archival community as well, to do annotations, and hopefully that will spread. So we think we'll have the tool built hopefully by the end of the year and be able to be using that. So this is the big moment of oohs and ahs from the crowd that we can get into the website itself. So we've been moving towards access this whole time. So we started in 2009, 2011. We started picking up with grants and whatnot in 2012. I think in my mind right now is when I started to collect documents and our team started going out to the archives. So it's really been 4.5 years of work to get to this early access point. So a lot of the behind the scenes work, as everyone is used to on a daily basis, but the public doesn't see before you can actually go live with a project. So the discovery site, the early access site, is where we're going to go to. So I'm going to share my screen now, or at least I should say I'm going to attempt. And we'll look at the website here in a little bit of detail, do a little tour. But please feel free to ask questions while I do this. And we're almost there. Go ahead. Oh, there we go. And just move this down.
As far as you can.
Okay.
That's probably as far as you can get.
Okay.
Great.
So this is the early access site. So oohs and ahs from everybody in attendance today, hopefully. And this is an Omeka-based site. The teams worked with developers Annalise was her name, who we worked with, a developer. But we're also working with the Brumfields moving forward on the next iteration of the site to develop the mash bill and integrate it to this site. So we'll be expanding what is on this site. So this is the home page. You can do a basic search here, throw any search term, and that's what I'll encourage you to think about right now is potential search terms that you want to throw into the database or into the website. And this worked really well at KLA, so give some good, thinking to surnames or to counties or to whatever topic you want to do a search on, and we'll see what we can find. But you can do a basic search there any way you want to, quotes, not quotes, and there is an advanced search. So this is a faceted search, and allows you to search by different fields that we have created. To the transcription itself, the place of creation, repository. Some people might want to access by repository. Might be a good search tool. Right now for the we have 5 repositories on here. So we actually have KDLA, the Kentucky Department of Military Affairs, the Kentucky Historical Society. Filson is not up yet, but will be coming into the next iteration. And then Maker's Mark Distillery, and the Mary Todd Lincoln House. And we'll go in a different way here in a minute to see how you can access those documents.
Let's start with Paynesville.
You want to start with Paynesville? Okay, let's do that.
Let's see what happens. That's my hometown, guys.
So, place of creation.
I grew up in Paynesville, so let's see what we got.
So, Paynesville. I know Paynesville very well. Is that Johnson County? Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, let's do a search here and see what happens.
And you guys, too, start typing in, chat in some answers.
Yeah. So
things you want to search.
So we have 11 documents that actually, in the place of creation field, have identified as Paynesville, Johnson County, Kentucky. So you can see here are the results. You can see on the left side, we break it down by repository, by collection, date of creation, place of creation, and the genre of document. So if you're looking for maybe a petition from Johnson County, you can click on that there too. So I'm going to go ahead and click into a document here so we can kind of see the viewer and how we have things set up. So we have a PDF viewer on the left, so you can see the original document itself. And we always wanted to have it next to the transcription. We want to have the authoritative transcription is what we're always aiming to get to right next to it. So you can look at both of those. Of course, the transcription is going to be easier to read in most cases. And if you find something we did wrong, we put a suggest a correction here. So please find. I challenge you to find errors. I know there are some with some of this handwriting. There are a lot of, in Louisville, for instance, German immigrants, and we've got an actual graduate research associate who has a pretty good background in German who's going to help us out on some of those. We have the Louisville Anzeiger German publication newspaper as well. We have some instances of that, so you can just click suggest a correction and send it in, and we will look at it and respond to you.
That is awesome. Here's one general question from Kathy. Is there a way to just go through and to see what you have?
As in, can you
just browse without a search term?
Yes, you can browse without a search term. We'll do that here momentarily, okay?
Okay, and then we've got 2 more search suggestions.
Okay.
Maureen has suggested children.
Okay.
So we can take a look at that one. And then Alicia has suggested Lawrenceburg, Anderson County.
Okay, I know there are some there. I was just looking at it yesterday.
And then one more question from Catherine.
Okay.
We need to repeat we can. Have you considered the possibility of crowdsourcing the more difficult to read documents?
Yes, that's something we have been aiming to do. So we work with a volunteer corps as well. We have one individual off-site who's working with us in around Ratcliffe, I do believe is where she is. And the back end to be able to do that in the database is not as functional as we would like it for multiple individuals to be in at this point. But thinking forward, crowdsourcing is definitely a possibility, especially when we get to the annotation process. Because we will be annotating the individuals in the documents, the organizations, the businesses, the geographical features. But even within those annotations, there are going to be individuals that come to light that we aren't going to write the annotation for, but they will be nodes. If you think of social networking, there will be nodes that will need to have annotations written, and that might be another possibility for crowdsourcing as well. So good question there. And we're always looking for volunteers. We're looking for individuals who want to be involved with this project. So here's some basic information on the left, as we talked about the search earlier. You can get a citation for the document, which gives you, it's Chicago manual based, but you can pull the citation. Researchers love that. And then you can download the document as well as the XML.
I noticed, yes, I tried this the other day, Tony. It's a good example. the download does come in as a pop-up.
It
so
does.
if your pop-up
Yes.
is blocked, I had to unblock my
There we
pop-up.
go.
So yeah.
Okay, here we go.
I'm glad that happened. That way we're.
So it's actually a branded PDF. So
Okay.
in discussions with archives, we didn't want to provide the actual PDF itself, so this was how we came about as the compromise, and I think it's very well done. It gives you the information you need, where it's from, and all the pages of it as well. So that's one way to access it or to save it to your site. So let's go up to, somebody asked about for children. Okay, well, let's do the browse function here, and then we'll do a search.
Perfect. Okay,
So you can browse a different way as well. So you can browse by repository. So if you know the repository or the collection that you've looked at before, let's say you've come to KDLA and you've found a document and you've noted that you got it at KDLA and you found it in a different collection or a certain collection. Let's just click on one here, official correspondence with military appointments for Brian McGoffin here. Then you can go into that collection and browse. And there's not many in that one, see?
Is Google going to pick up your
Here we
searches
go.
as well with your annotations and your transcriptions?
Yes.
That's what I think is.
It is picking up, so a lot of, we've done searches when we're starting this annotation process, looking for individuals. I've been recently doing annotations for all of the judicial branch in Kentucky, from county courts and circuit courts up to the appeals court. And many times when you put in a search term for a particular individual, the governor's papers will be the first hit you get because it's the only thing out there with this person's name on it.
Right.
So that definitely comes up in Google, and the more the more you use that, the more people click on it, the better results we're going to get on that as well. So now you can see there's 440 documents from that collection, and you can just scan through it. You could break it down by date if you have a particular date or a place or type of document like in the other search terms. So so that's another way to engage the documents as well. So there's multiple levels at which you can browse or search the collections itself. So let's look at children. So let's look at children here. We'll just do a basic search here.
Oh, wow.
So children comes up 625 times, and I will say that a majority of those times are probably an individual writing into the governor who's looking for a pardon or a remission of a fine or a respite, looking for a longer period to pay the fine, and who are saying that I am a poor man, I have a wife, I have a mother I'm taking care of, and I have 5 children. So they're trying to, in many parts, get sympathy for not being able to pay the fine. So children comes up quite a bit in there. I'm trying to think of particular instances. There are a lot of cases with public drunkenness and or selling liquor to a minor. So you get some young adults, I guess, some older children in that way as well. We don't see children, of course, participating in like a petitioning process. They might be mentioned in there by name sometimes in a document if there's a particular case somebody's looking at. So they do appear, most definitely. So that's a pretty good one. And then the other one was Lawrence, Anderson County. So let's go back to the advanced search here. Place of creation, and we'll look at. I will say this, that sometimes there's not a place of creation listed in the correspondence or in a lot of cases on the pardon documents. So there's not an official place of creation, but I need to spell here. Lawrenceburg, there we go. But it might be a county mentioned in the document itself, but we don't know if it was actually written in that county or that place. And that's how we're trying to identify where did the document originate from. If we can't tell that, then it's not going to be in a place creation. So there's 12 documents for Lawrenceburg, Anderson County, in this run of 10,000 documents. We could also, let's click on one just to bring one up here. It's somebody resigning as a justice of the peace, and that's 65. You find that quite often in 61 at the beginning of the war. A lot of public officials are resigning to join the Army, either side. So you're seeing a lot of resignations, especially justice of the peace for some reason. So they're going off to war in many cases. Let's look here another way. Let's just do place of creation. Let's see, and how about let's just do Lawrenceburg. See what comes up there. Okay. So that's coming up that way. So let's look at Anderson County, just to see how you could search that in multiple ways. 28. So you got a few more that are in Anderson County, but not Lawrenceburg specific. So you can search in multiple ways, and down here we should see Anderson County, Kentucky, Lawrenceburg, Anderson County, Rough and Ready, another one of those great Kentucky names. So yeah, so that's another good search. Thank you very much for that.
Mark's got another one. He said, anything on the Confederate sympathizers executed in Kentucky?
Let's think here. So how can we best... Let's see if we do that. Because there'll be people talked about sympathizing with one side or the other. So there's legislation in here. Let's see what this is. So proclamations are included in here as well.
Sympathizers with the rebellion who will enjoy protection from the government.
Yeah. Yeah, so there are different mentions of that, people being taken into custody, quite a few. I mean, Thomas Bramlett's lieutenant governor is, Richard T. Jacob is arrested and thrown out of the state at one point for making an anti-Lincoln speech, really talking about being anti-African-American enlistment in 64, 65. You also have other politicians, John B. Houston, can't remember any off the top of my head at the moment, who were also arrested for sympathizing with the Confederacy. You also see in pardon files a lot of times, you can see the process the governors go through. Bramlett's really good about writing a legal reason for pardoning or not pardoning a certain case. But you do see a lot of people who are appealing that, he joined the Union Army, or he's out of the Union Army now as a veteran of the Union Army, and he deserves to be pardoned for this crime. And Bramlett, a lot of times, especially in 64 moving into 65, it signs off on those and pardons those. He was a good man, he's a good Union man. Or he asks a question about when an appointment is put up for a judge, for a justice of the peace, for a sheriff. Is he a good Union man? So there are those types of discussions as well as far as sympathies. So yes, those do appear.
Amanda brought guerrillas.
Guerrillas, yes. Lots and lots of guerrillas. Spelled many different ways. Guerrillas, you can imagine how it's spelled. It's spelled as gorilla, as in the animal. There's a collection in the Kentucky Department of Military Affairs that is basically Guerrilla Letters. I think it's actually called Guerrilla Letters on the files over there. And this is so guerrilla activity on both sides is occurring across the state, and you have a lot of individuals writing in saying that they're being terrorized, that their property is being destroyed, that they are terrorizing our women and our children. Some soldiers are writing back and saying they need to go home because they need to protect their families, they need to protect their communities. So there's a lot of guerrilla letters. And that's one thing to keep in mind, too, is searchability is always limited because, so if I search for guerrilla, I would also search for it in any way that I think it could be spelled.
And
so
Catherine actually just brought that up as another question. Does spelling matter when searching?
It will, yes. It will matter. Oh, so it didn't come up with that, at least not in this run of documents. But, I mean, they could come up. Now I'm like making, none of them. I'm not spelling them incorrectly good enough, if that makes sense. Guerilla. Let's try that.
1 hour.
So yeah, so 1 year. So that will come up under different, as I was saying, there are different levels of literacy across the state, and things are spelled every different way.
Well, and so that would also go with your annotations of the individuals, correct? people may vary on how they spell their name or
Yes.
how someone wrote their name down. So
Mhm.
you would have to search the variations on the name
Yes.
as well.
Yes, you will have to search variations on names as well, on surnames, and that will be part of the annotation process. Because there will be instances where we have one document from somebody, or we'll have multiple documents. And the first time the signature may be a bad signature, or he may have misspelled his or her name. And so we might not be able to annotate it the first time because we don't know who that person is. But we will search all alternative spellings when we're doing our annotation research. But you'll also need to do that in this function as well. We haven't come up if there are any ideas. We're always open to ideas as to how to make the search a better search. We've been asked about that, especially from genealogists quite a bit. I've talked to several groups, and they want to know different iterations of spellings and how that's most effective to search it. So surnames will come up in many different varieties, and often in the same document too, be spelled 3 or 4 different ways. So Gorillas comes up across the board. We were lucky enough to have a Civil War guerrilla scholar on our team for about a year, who has recently moved on with his wife to go back into teaching, Matt Holbert. So he was able to write some blog posts. So there's some blog posts on here as well. You can access that through the main page. This news function down here will take you back to the original website. So this is our original website, but we have multiple posts. So we find something cool we like to talk about, or write a topic, something we want to share, especially before we had early access, to keep people informed on what we were doing, what kind of cool finds, new things we were finding, new topics we were finding to discuss. We always write articles on that, so you can see a variety. We wrote something on search, faceted search, early access is here. We did a tour, but you can get down to other topics too. One of the big projects we've had as well as part of this is the Caroline Chronicles. And that's an educational tool for teachers in the classroom, high school, AP high school, going into undergraduate courses. We've had requests actually from all over the world, we can say that, because we've had requests from Germany, from England, all across the United States, multiple high schools and colleges, mostly high schools in Kentucky, who know about it. But it's about Caroline, who is an individual of questionable status. We don't know. She's an African-American woman. We think she was a slave of an individual and is mentioned as a slave in Tennessee, who follows Buell's army into Kentucky in 1962, is re-enslaved in Louisville with the Levi family, is eventually charged with murder of the Levi family's daughter using strychnine, and goes through the legal process, is convicted of murder, and goes through the whole pardoning process as well. The hanging is she is going to be put to death by hanging, and the process continues on. The hanging is delayed several times, and she's ultimately pardoned by Bramlett. Is she guilty? Is she not guilty? There's a lot of evidence both ways. I fall after looking at the evidence, on the not guilty side. So I think it was right in the end. But we've written a lot of different chronicle posts. Matt and Patrick Lewis, who's the project director, did a lot. I did a follow-up because I did some newspaper research and find some, this is Willis Levi, who's in Louisville. We find the cell of actually her husband in Louisville as well, John Wesley, who's on a family member's property not too far from there. And here is the actual Blanche. Blanche is the daughter, who is found dead and found convulsing in the backyard and eventually dies. So we've tracked this. We've put a lot of time and effort in this. We did a podcast through the University of Kentucky as well, which you can find on the website. So if you do, there we go, Caroline Chronicles. This is more information if you want to have friends in education who would like to use something like this. You can access the Long Story Short podcast, all the different blog posts about Caroline, and request the material. We actually have course packets for teachers and students that we've created. So we're going to be doing more of this along the way. We've got a couple other projects in line. So this is, you can see, a multi-tiered, multifaceted, able to engage in many different varieties, not only with the documents themselves, but with other tools. And you can see the featured exhibit is actually Caroline as well. So you can, let's see, documents are available somewhere on here. No, that's not what I want. Sorry. So, oh yes, there. Duh. Thank you. So here's a transcription of one of the documents. Yeah. So come here and look at that. I would urge you to do so. This is an individual we would know nothing about, and a lot of the actors. One of the next phases, which I'll move into here momentarily, will be the social networking aspect, and we actually have social networked Caroline quite a bit in all the documents that are tied to her. So we'll talk a little bit about visualization as well. So we have another thing I want to say is there are a lot of policies. Documentary report to Mecca is on here. Report to the annotation plan for Mashville is on here as well. How it's going to function, what it's going to look like, and the process for using hypothesis to do the annotation. So I would urge you to look at that. Governor's biography, so a lot of other data that we've created. Wall charts I mentioned, we created maps for judicial districts, congressional districts, and the key players in those districts, which will be helpful. It helps us quite a bit. We refer to them quite often. Bibliography for further reading by topic. There's the browse we talked about earlier. The exhibits page, which has Caroline. Also has our graduate research associates who just started, so view those individuals as well. So let me go back now to do a quick thing on the next phase. So the next phase is Annotation Beta, which will be integrating the annotations. I need to figure out how to get out of here, sorry. There I am. I'm good. Here we go.
Great job. Just give it a second.
Okay, good. So we'll be getting into social networking. So how do these people connect? And this is really a big part of this. We know who's corresponding with who. We know whose cases people are involved with, what lawyers are writing in on behalf of people, all levels of society, sections of society are in contact. And this is just a, oops, I didn't mean to do that. This is a visualization of what it will look like. So this is networking Caroline's entire document and social networking, who she's in contact with, what court she's in contact with. If I click on that, can I do the share screen again?
Yes.
Okay. Let me move that down. I'm sorry. We'll go back into share screen to show you the visualizations we're thinking of. So as we move into this, as we do the annotations, this will allow us to really understand society in Kentucky, and that's what we're trying to get at here. So here's, woo! So this is the, yeah, there we go. Well, it's moving. I don't want it to move. There we go. I'll just do it this way. This is one of the possible social networking visualizations, how different connections, somebody's, it's like degrees of Kevin Bacon. There's another project called, is it 7 degrees or 6 degrees? 6 degrees. 6 degrees of Francis Bacon. So somebody's doing a project on that too. So it's like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon as well. These are different ones we're considering as well. So there's a color version with different type of relationships are noted by different colors. So that's another possibility. There are some, let's see, here's an arc diagram. So you can see kind of the complexities of society, who's talking to who and who's connected. Let's see if this one does. Here's another one. Relationships. This reminds me of a crossword puzzle book of some sort. But yeah, so you can get different types of relationships, understand who's connected to who, and different layers of those relationships. So yeah, so visualization's coming along. Get back to the presentation here. I think I'm pretty much at the last slide. But any questions that you may have, please feel free to send to me at any point. My contact information is here on the page. It's also in the slides that Valerie sent out yesterday. But the project will continue on. We're projecting 10 more years of work from here. We've reached out probably to most of the repositories you're tied to, libraries and archives, museums, and we'll continue to work. And next year we'll have the first 1,500 documents up by September or by October that are fully annotated and put into this social networking environment. And we'll continue to work from there to keep adding to that every year, and hopefully add more individuals to work on the project, and more resources moving forward to really build this out. So we may be visiting your repository soon. We would love to come out and talk to people across the state as well. We've talked to a variety of libraries, the Kentucky Library Association, of course, different genealogical groups, Civil War roundtables. So we're trying to get out and network with individuals and talk to groups and introduce people to the project. So are there any additional questions that you may ask at this point? I'd be more than happy to answer those. But it's a fun project. It's fun to be out working in the community with different partners in the archives, meeting people, and really discovering what the next decades and decades of research is going to be built upon. Is going to be a lot of these documents right here. So access is great. I'm glad. Yes, we do too, Mark. We spend a lot of hours here, even though we're working on it every day. But it's a great tool, something that you can give to researchers walking in, whether it's to do their ancestry and genealogical work, people who are researchers who are working on potentially school papers, and use with elementary, high school, middle school students, college students, any kind of student to do some research. So I hope you enjoyed this tour. I hope you learned about a new tool as well to use with researchers, and I know many of you are familiar with Omeka. So this is another way in which it is being used and being considered in at least the documentary editing community, and maybe integrated into your all's work as well. So please be in touch. Give us a phone call. Drop us an email. We'd love to talk to you and/or come and visit you.
Thanks so much, Tony. I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up here. It seems we have a few people chatting in. It's my goal to get your certificate of attendance and your follow-up email to you this afternoon. Don't forget there'll be a brief survey with that. We encourage you to fill that out. I'll be sharing that information with Tony so that he'll have some feedback from today's presentation. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to go ahead and mute the mic, but we'll stay around for a few minutes. Thanks, everyone.